the consequences were first physical. I started being sick all the time. And then I realized, well, if I get up and have a drink in the morning, I don't feel sick. It takes away some of the shakes.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's edition of Recovery Happens. Today we're going to be sitting down with Rick as he offers hope to encourage recovery.
Life growing up as a child was actually, if you looked at my family, typical back in the day. Dad worked, mom took care of the kids. Alcoholism was in my family, but everybody was functional. It was more on the men's side, and I never related that it was a huge problem in my family because we were well taken care of. But eventually, there was threads of like my mom being upset, where's my dad at? And as a child, when you're walking around, you kind of like, okay, you start to have some anxiety from that. And that's looking at it like in retrospect.
Did your dad struggle with alcohol?
My dad did struggle with alcoholism, yeah. He's 35 years clean now. So yeah, all male members on my father's side and on my mom's side had an issue with alcohol, all males. So if you're talking about the genetic link, it's definitely there for me. My main drug was alcohol, and remember I talked about those anxiety issues as a child and fitting in socially growing up through like junior high and high school. Well, I was drinking from 13 on. You could buy alcohol at the stores and go pay them a little extra, get a little alcohol. And from the moment I took a sip of alcohol, and I think this is common from the other alcoholics I've talked to, I felt like I fit in. I felt comfortable in my own skin. And I'm like, where you been all my life? But obviously it wasn't on the regular, maybe on the weekends. High school was every weekend. But I was still very functional. The consequences started happening with me first in relationships. My very first serious relationship, intimate relationship, they notice a pattern. Like every time you go do something, you have to be with them, and then the focus can be like the alcohol. And for a while it's fun. Well, someone can drink socially, and I've never been a social drinker, never. It's always been one's gonna open up the gateway to everything else. So they would feel in competition with the alcohol. The women would, my relationships, and I don't blame them because I couldn't see it at the time. I just thought I was having fun because there was no financial consequences. I've always had a nice place to live. I've always had a car. There was none of that, so I'm like, well, why do I have to stop? There's no real reason. And you would think that if given a choice between someone that you cared about and loved, that you would try to, okay, I'm gonna slow down and refrain. And I did for a while, but it always would come back, and would come back more with a vengeance. And you would try to stop, and it's like, nah, you know what? I feel awkward. I haven't, the anxiety comes back. That was the big thing for me. The anxiety would always, and it's a threat in my family too. Everybody that I know in my family has anxiety issues, worries about stuff. Probably in mid-20s, moved out of my family's home, got my first apartment in Rochester, right? So I thought that was before Rochester was real popular. I thought, oh man, I'm doing well, right? Making a good living, started my own little business. The consequences were first physical. I started being sick all the time. And then I realized, well, if I get up and have a drink in the morning, I don't feel sick. It takes away some of the shakes. The one thing that really sticks out in my mind where I knew I had a serious problem, in that apartment, I was dating a very nice young lady, and I would go pick her up on the weekends, and she'd stay at my place, for a couple of days, and just a very, very nice lady. I really cared for her. And I woke up in the middle of the night, and I thought I had like the flu. But I knew because I'd been drinking like you drink every night, right? Functional, but still drinking. And I woke, I had the first time I ever had the DTs. And I really didn't even know what it was. I just know I had to have something to stop that shaking. So I got up out of bed, I went into my bathroom, opened it, and I started rummaging through the closets. I was drinking cough syrup. I was drinking whatever was in there to stop me from feeling the way I did. And I found a bottle of, it was mouthwash, right? And I looked at it and I saw that it had some alcohol in it, and I just downed half a bottle of mouthwash. And when I did that, I heard something behind me, and I looked, and it was my girlfriend at the time. And the look on her face, it didn't register with me at the time, but I knew it was bad. But years later, it was this. I love this guy, but I got myself into way bigger issues than I thought. And it's emotional for me because I felt that years later. Because of the veil of the alcohol, you don't really feel anything. It kind of registers on the soul, but I had to deal with that later. And obviously, you know, everybody I ever dated, I mean, after they learned that there's no competition for this booze.
Is it normal just to drink half a thing of, what was it, mouthwash?
Is that normal?
Yeah.
At the time, whatever it took, but I knew that drinking the mouthwash was not normal. And I started thinking, well, maybe I have a problem. Like now all my relatives are sober, right? And did program work. Could I possibly be this? Could I have possibly taken a different path and got worse results? So that was going through my mind. But at the time, you know, men suit up, show up, party hard, and handle their stuff. So that's what I did. And at the time, I was making more money than my friends. I was the first one that had a real cool apartment in a really nice location. So it was a big draw. It was a lure. But it was a facade, you know. It looked good on the outside, but the foundation's going to cave in pretty soon. I wasn't having it. I thought if you admitted that you were powerless over anything, that you're a failure. And I look at that now, that's my pride and my ego. I was taught to go after whatever I wanted, and if that wall's in my way, I'm going through it. That's a lot of that's me. I can be very stubborn. So if there's pain attached to it, and I've heard that from a lot of recovering people, that if there's pain attached to it, physical pain, we are used to. We are used to that. So if I had a goal on the other side of it, whatever it may be, I'm going after it. So if my rocket fuel is alcohol, we load up, right? Until the consequences keep stacking up. That's what happens. They keep standing. And I look at them now as they were speed bumps from God, my higher power. Listen, Rick, you might want to stop. You're hurting people in your path. You're putting your life in danger, driving around all the time on motorcycles and cars drunk. Everybody says, was recovery easy for me? It can be, and my first year was glorious because there was nothing to hold on to anymore. All these things, all these balls I was juggling in the air fell. So everybody tries to save things, and that was my MO. If my wife, can I get her back? What about my house I saved all for? I'm not my house. I'm not my relationships, okay? I'm none of those. So when I burned it all to the ground, there was nothing left. I mean, literally, I could not walk. So when I went to the 3-quarter housing, which they recommended, which I never wanted to go to, it was the last option on the table. So I go there, and what a better place to be around 16 guys struggling from the same thing I was. That all the focus was getting up, staying sober, going to meetings, and then eventually being a part of society. But the focus, recovery first. And that has seemed to work for me. But
how long did that take?
How long did that take? Years. I'm going to be honest with you, it takes years. The society we live in, the way I look at it, it's fast-paced. And there's a good side to that, and for a guy like me, maybe not so good side to that. I truly believe I was supposed to be born in the 20s. You know, but things are so fast-paced right now that you can stay so busy and never work on you. We're all attached to these technological devices, okay, which is not necessarily a bad thing. There's a lot of benefits to it. But if I never deal with what's going on inside of here, and that's what recovery teaches you, more than likely I'm going to go back to the substances to fill that void. So I got to stay in conscious contact with my higher power and program to diffuse all the stimulation around me.
Thank you for watching this edition of Recovery Happens. If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction, please give us a call at 888-68-BWROC. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Blue Water Habitat for Humanity.